All right, hello everybody. My name is Amalia Weber. I'm the program specialist here at Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's program, Solving the First Great Lakes Maritime Mystery. Due to unforeseen circumstances and out of an abundance of caution, our speaker Steve Libert could not make it this evening. In his place is Brian Abbott, who has assisted Steve and Kathie Libert in their search for the Griffon in the Great Lakes. Brian has been a commercial diver for over 20 years and is the owner of Nautilus Marine Group International, L.L.C, which specializes in high-resolution acoustic imaging for underwater inspections and offers services and training in the areas of condition assessments, engineering inspections, quality assurance/quality control, forensic survey, and archaeological survey. Brian will discuss the search for the Griffon and other famous shipwrecks for us tonight. RHPL apologizes for the change in speaker, but will reschedule the Liberts for a later date. Now, before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. Firstly, tonight's program will be recorded and available to view about 1 week from tonight on our YouTube page and on the RHPL website shortly after. We ask the audience members please silence or turn off their cell phones before we begin in order to avoid any disturbances during the presentation. Our next program is Michigan Rehabilitation Services, assisting individuals with disabilities obtain employment, which will take place digitally via Zoom on Tuesday, May 17th at 7 p.m. You can sign up for that at calendar.rhpl.org. And now, without further ado, please welcome our presenter, Brian Abbott.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it coming down here and spending some time with you folks. To make a long story short, Steve called me at 9 o'clock this morning and said, Brian, I got COVID. And I went, oh. And so he could not make it. He apologizes for that stuff. So I'm going to step in and try to give you some information on the Griffon. I am not a Griffon expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a marine archaeologist. I'm not a naval architect. I will try and explain some things that Steve believes why he's found the Griffon and so forth. But one of the things, like I said, is I've known Steve for 15 years or so. And a lot of people think, Steve's, he's kind of weird. He's out there. Another guy thinks he's found the Griffon and stuff. But what people don't realize with Steve is that he's looked for the Griffon for 40 years. In that 40-year time period, he was working for the National Security Administration, NSA. He rose to higher ranks. He kept us secure at night. We could sleep at night. So as far as Steve being a crackpot and stuff like that, I get phone calls every week about working with stuff and people that are kind of strange and weird. Steve's not, okay? He's very analytical. He worked for the Chief of Naval Intelligence. So he's very good in his search and his information and his data. He doesn't make calls without having information, data, and backup and stuff. But like I said, Steve's been looking for the Griffon since, I believe, the late 70s. And he started reading about it, studying about it, understanding about it. He's had a lot of fights with the state of Michigan over the years in the court system. That's cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get permission to go do an archaeological permit to look for the Griffon, to find things, to excavate, to dig, so forth. That was fulfilled finally in 2017, I believe. They did an archaeological expedition up in these islands that are off of Fairport, Michigan, on the Green Bay Peninsula and the Door Peninsula. There's a gap, but there's islands in between there. You'll see a map in a few minutes, and that's where Steve believes that he's found it. So Steve sent me this PowerPoint. Unfortunately, it's a little bulky, and it doesn't respond real well. So I'm going to try and walk through a few things and a few slides just to show you what Steve's interpretation is and why he believes that he's found the Griffon. So this is a 1600s, 17th century map of what's happening in North America. You have on the western side of the world over here, you have the Spanish in control of everything. Most of central U.S. and Canada is owned by the French. On the coastline, you have the British all the way up through Canada, up through here, modern day, but you still have the Spanish down here in the 1600s, 1500s. They're controlling. So this is what's going on in the world. You know, it's playland for these empires that are trying to build. The French are taking a different approach. They're going in country. They're using long, big canoes, voyageurs as they're called, to go back into the country to get pelts of beaver and deer and everything and bring them back all the way up to Quebec or Montreal, and they sail them back to New France, France, not this, they call this New France. So the British see this as colonization. Let's get rid of a bunch of people and we can ship them to the colonies and get rid of them. Spain sees this as a new empire searching for gold and silver and all sorts of stuff that's taking place exploration-wise in the New World. You know, part of the New World exploration that took place in the 1600s was done by a gentleman named Robert L.L.C. And he pretty much explored the territory of what we call the Louisiana Purchase at the time. This is 130 years later in time, but this is what he did. He was looking for controlling fur trade all the way from Hudson Bay, Jamestown, all the way to the west. They were looking for a route to the Pacific, the Great Northern Route, up that way, then also through the U.S. But he explored a lot of the areas and went literally all the way from Quebec all the way down the Mississippi, through the Great Lakes, all the way down the Mississippi into the Gulf. And he had another ship down there called the Belle, which was built in France but taken apart and put back together. They actually found the Belle about 15, 20 years ago. And they found it in the water. They built a coffer dam around it, drained it, then did an excavation. So if you search for the La Belle out there, you can see what the possibility of this ship looks like, because only half of it's there. But they also consider it a possible sister ship to the Griffon. So they get some idea of dimensions, kind of rough lengths, widths, heights, and so forth. So another gentleman that was really active in this area of exploration and so far was a Jesuit priest, Father Pierre, Xavier de Charlevoix. He did a lot of exploring up and down the Mississippi, throughout the Great Lakes and stuff, and he also was out there setting the routes, setting the trade systems, setting up missionary places along the Great Lakes so people could stop, take rest, and so forth. So, we all know them as towns of St. Agnes and Marquette and, way over in Green Bay and on the different rivers. So the Jesuits and the voyageurs were out there paddling, in these huge, massive 20, 30-foot canoes, taking trade back and forth with the Indians and so forth. And the voyageurs would be out there throughout the winter months trapping and so forth, and they would come back and bring their pelts back to Montreal or Quebec and do that. So if I didn't say this, I think I said it, but I don't know when I said it. But if you got a question, just raise your hand, okay? You just say, hey, and we'll try and answer it as best we can and so forth. So as part of this, also this legacy of the Griffon, since it was the first sailing ship of the Great Lakes, it was also the first sailing ship lost in the Great Lakes. It disappeared on its maiden voyage. So yeah, and it pretty much, my understanding is it almost bankrupt or did bankrupt LaSalle because he was funded by the Crown of France and the ship disappeared. Steve believes there's probably 20 claims of people that have found the Griffon over the years at different places in the Great Lakes and so forth. Some people believe it's in the upper reaches of Lake Huron, maybe even Georgian Bay area. Other people believe it was in Green Bay, in that area and so forth. But Steve, being the analyst he is, took a lot of time searching for it as far as going to a library and reading. He went to different countries looking at exploration, reading a lot of journals of the Jesuits that came through. There's a big manual out there called Jesuit Relations. And it's a book that lists all the kind of a diary of Jesuit priests throughout the years and so forth that traveled, where they traveled, how far they traveled, how many days it took to do things. So one of the things that I believe Steve said he discovered was that, measurements change over time. You can go back biblical times and, this distance to here is a cubit, this distance is my stride and so forth. There was no uniform, for almost, only 150 years ago, 200 years ago, we came up with a metric system that was kind of uniform, but we still all have this standard unit thing we call miles, feet, yards, fathoms, all these different things to measure things. If you ever look at the state of Michigan, you'll see the boundaries at the southern part of the state between Ohio and Indiana. They come together like this, then they jog up. Well, one survey crew started in Lake Erie, the other survey crew started in Michigan, and they came together like this. And if you ever want some fun, it's called Meridian Road for the right reason. It goes up through the state of Michigan, and all the roads come together like this. And they're about 400 feet apart. And so, when you're out there going through the swamps of Michigan in 1780, you're a little bit off. Yep. So, but that's why. But what Steve found out was that there is a French unit of measurement, and it's nautical mile. But it was a different nautical mile. And I don't know the full story, but he talks about it was 40 nautical miles, I believe. I could be wrong on that, so don't hold me to that, of distance that they traveled. And so, because the last time my understanding is that they saw him at St. Ignace as they were sailing around. And then they supposedly went to Green Bay to pick up a load of furs, trade with the Indians, and they were on their return voyage. So this group of islands is in between the Door Peninsula and the Green Bay Peninsula. They come together like this. So we have, down here we have Washington Island, St. Martin's, Poverty Island, and this is Big Summer Island. And my understanding is that they took off and the weather was good and so forth, but when they got to Washington Island, the weather was getting bad. And the local Potawatomi tribe said, hey, I don't think you need to go, there's a storm coming. And having been out in this area working, it's pretty amazing what can happen with a storm coming from the northwest. It's fairly shallow speaking-wise, and they're called seiches. And these fronts will come through and they'll push the water out, okay, right out of the bay. And it can change by 4 or 5 feet in elevation, a really good storm. And what he thinks possibly happened to the Griffon is they left port here, sailing, and now they're fully exposed into Lake Michigan, but they said, hey, let's take refuge up here behind the island on the L.L.C side. We'll take safe port. Well, what they didn't realize, according to Steve, is that this sage came in and it spins. It's like a toilet bowl. And it seems like the ship went down. Okay, the Griffon disappeared. And LaSalle spent a couple of years looking for it, going up and down the Great Lakes. He found no trace of it and so forth. So I'm not sure what exactly the exploration was to find the Griffon from LaSalle, how much time he spent, the crews looking for it and stuff, but he did spend some time trying to find it. So this is where Steve believes that the Griffon lies, in this area, and he's keeping that kind of tight. If you get his book, you'll figure it out a little bit more, but this right here was the ship loaded? Yes. Yeah. The only valuable things, my understanding is, on the Griffon that would be phenomenally to get is the ship's log. You're looking at pretty much pelts. You may be looking at some trade goods with the Indian tribes and so forth that they used, as far as tools or beads or that type of stuff they could trade. This is the, as you can see here, the south shore of Poverty Island. This is Steve standing out here Water levels are a lot higher now, but you could walk out here, but you can see the violence of the storm coming in there. And if you try and take refuge on that side of the island, it could push you right into those rocks and smash you up pretty good. So that's what he's believing is happening.
Where is that on the little map here in the corner of the screen?
Right here?
No, she's talking about the little, if you look at the screen.
Yeah. On this, oh, this one?
Yeah.
That was the first one I showed you, the big map.
Where on that map are these islands?
Okay. If we look here, maybe this might help you. Okay, here's Michigan. There's the mitten right there, okay? There's St. Ignace, Mackinac City. You're going across the UP over to Escanaba. So this is the Green Bay Peninsula coming up, Washington Island. This is the Door Peninsula. So he's talking about right in here, that they left Washington Island and came up through here, okay, and tried to get safe harbor. Yes?
All hands went down with the ship, correct?
Good story. I don't know. Because I've read other things that some were taken captive. And some Jesuits in the Jesuit relations talk about running into white men like 15 years later, outing in central Wisconsin and so forth. So some of may have just said, whatever, I'm going with you guys. You know, it's a 1,500 miles back, take it back, and I've got no ship. So, but that's the path that Steve believes that the Griffon took. Now, Steve's been to France looking at logs, looking at journals, really digging through the archives of these things. So he feels that he's got a really good handle on where things are going. Yes?
What's on that last picture that you had?
Mm-hmm.
What's the starting point of the Griffon voyage? It was somewhere around St. Ignace.
The Griffon actually started just at the mouth of where the Niagara River starts from Lake Erie. Okay? He believes that they built the ship was there, that it was built, and so they sailed it out of the Niagara River all through Lake Erie, up the Detroit River, St. Clair, St. Mary's.
Okay, but this map showed the northwest quadrant of Lake Michigan, and it showed the beginning of the, not the end, but the
Right.
beginning of the voyage was someplace back right across from Mackinac City.
Well, this is all part of that first journey, is my understanding, that they took. So it was all together. So as they went up the St. Mary's River into Lake Huron, they went over to Mackinac.
So you just showed us a lane of that.
Yes. Okay, that's a good point. Duly noted. One of the things, the big misconception in Steve's eye, is that everybody always talks about the Huron Islands. All right? And everyone believes, well, Huron Islands are Lake Huron. And, you know, you've got Manitou Island, Drummond Island, all these islands up through here. So Steve said it didn't make sense to him because they last seen the ship at Washington Island over in northern Lake Michigan and stuff. Well, he started going through the archives, looking at maps and so forth, and he actually found markings on early French maps geographically stating that these islands, Washington Island, Poverty Island, are part of the Huron Islands. So that's where, like, oh, clue number one, you know, that's where Huron Islands were because, you know, maps change over time. Towns change names, islands change names and stuff. So that's really one of the steps that he got involved in. We're looking at, and this is an early French map of the area and so forth. So again, yeah, so you've got, you know, the Green Bay Peninsula, Door Peninsula's up to here, here are your islands and stuff like that. So that was kind of a big clue for him that he was in the correct place looking for the Griffon over time. So I don't know the time period. I hadn't met Steve yet. But there was exploring the north end of Poverty Island. And at the north end of Poverty Island, it's a garbage dump of shipwrecks. I've never seen such a scatter field of shipwrecks in my life at the north end of Poverty Island. And good, bad, or indifferent, one of the things that's changed in the last 25, 30 years in the Great Lakes, you guys all probably know about these little tiny creatures called zebra mussels. Okay, they're gone now. Now we got quaggas. Well, what used to be zero visibility is now like you're on a Caribbean beach and you're seeing 100 feet out into the Great Lakes. They've changed the whole ecology of the Great Lakes and stuff. But when these things hit, they really started filtering the water system of the Great Lakes. And Steve was exploring the north end of Poverty Island, and he came across this pole sticking straight up in the mud. And they looked at it for years, and they knew they couldn't do anything. They needed to do an archaeological excavation. And Steve is good friends with a lot of French archaeologists, because the way the world works, this is a sovereign French vessel, all right? It flies under the flag of France, so they own that vessel if it's ever been found and stuff. So he understood a few things about measurement. He believed that this was a bowsprit, and there's trunnels sticking out of it and so forth at different lengths and so forth. He believed that this is a mast coming through here, and we'll go through that a little bit. And the reason being is that working with these French archaeologists, they were able to take measurements and come up with units of French measurement.
What depth was that located at?
It's around 65, 70 feet. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can see people are diving on it right now. Come on. This is looking straight down that, what he believes is the mast step. And you can see the wooden pegs sticking out and so forth. So he started looking at things a little bit more.
It's not actually a photograph.
Yes. Yep, that's actually a photograph looking at it. All right, so he thinks it's at this part of the ship there. So this is a drawing of that pole sticking out of the mud. What it looks like, you can see the different dimensions and everything. One of the things that we talked about earlier is that what are units of measurement in France in the 1600s? But also, what are units of measurements when they came to North America? Because everybody's different. You know, you got Bubba over in the shipyard building a ship that no one's ever built a ship for the Great Lakes. He may be a shipwright in France, but you're trying to figure out how to sail the Great Lakes for the first time. You're trying to figure out dimensions, how big is big, how small is small, and everything. So Steve did a lot of work. These dimensions are strange. Come to find out, talking with French archaeologists, they're French units of measurement, he feels, in this mass step. However, when they had their archaeological expedition there back in 2017, they were actually able to pull the mast out of the water, look at it. Steve has had it laser scanned in, so he has it in 3D imaging and everything down to millimeter size. One of the things that was a big controversy about things is that some archaeologists that were there said, that's not a mast, that's a ponnet stake. A ponnet stake, okay? What's a ponnet stake? Well, ponnet stakes were developed in early 1800s for fishing in the Great Lakes, and I'll show you what they do here in a moment. But they come in, they cut a pole, they chop the end off so it's nice and sharp and stuff. But here's the end of what he feels his post or mast right here. It's flat on one side and it's curved kind of straight down this way, which would give him an angle to set that post, Steve feels, on the ship. All right. So there was a big argument, a big brouhaha over the ponnet stakes, and on this one, hopefully. So what you would do, this is a picture of a ponnet stake netting operation. You pound these into the ground, Okay? Now realize that post mast, whatever, was 60 feet, 65 feet into the water. It's only about 8-9 feet high. All right? So it didn't have a connection on the top. So you need to pound that so you can put your nets on there and drive fish in there, and you can come back later and pull your nets and you have fish. All right? It really this kind of really ripped apart the Great Lakes fishing back in the 1800s. They were able to make these huge, massive hauls on fishing and stuff, and feed half the world. So there is an argument about that. If you get Steve's book, he'll talk about that. He'll explain dimensions, diameters, and why he believes it's a bowsprit instead of a mast, a bowsprit. So.
What was the word you used for the stakes driven in? Charlie?
Yeah, it's like a wooden peg, pound in.
If you look at the way those are carved, they're just tree poles,
Mm-hmm.
like a pencil.
Right.
The grain lines on the piece of wood that he had were totally different.
Yes,
There was not even no comparison between the two.
I would agree. We'll go through these slides right here. When he had this laser scan, it's still in preservation up in a town called Waters, Michigan, in a box of water still being preserved. Nobody's sure what to do with it, but you can see once this comes up, shoot me now. So what's interesting about this is there's letter carving. There's Roman numeral carvings on this thing. And what he believes they may be is part numbers, dimensional numbers of this piece of wood, all right, that you would put together, A matches B and so forth, and come together. So you can see these on this three-dimensional laser scan of the bowsprit. So it looks really kind of unique and operational for the type of work that they do. All right, so let's go to where he believes he has diving on this shipwreck. So what we're looking at, obviously we have a diver. I don't know if this will. So right here, I'll have to do it here. Right here we have the keel of what he believes the Griffon is. Okay, it's a big block of wood. I think it's 60 feet long. He's got wooden frames coming out the side. They're kind of like they call the ribs of the ship. So he's got that type of stuff going on. A very unique construction, very unique architecture that's on it.
You mentioned that the ship started in the Niagara region. So there was a lot of it from parts that were
No.
built
Built entirely there. One of the things Steve looked at was, in order to understand, okay, if you're going to build a ship in 1670 and you can't get it up the Niagara Falls, and you don't want to tow it around Niagara Falls. There's no well and canal and stuff. So you got to go on the other side of the falls. He looked at a couple of islands, and what we looked at was, the forests of the U.S. have all been cut down, right? But what was the forest like in 1679? You had this old, massive growth forest. And so what type of wood would you be using? Oak, pine, all this type of stuff. You have to use what's available. And also making your own spikes, your own nails, your own pegs to pound in there to connect timber and stuff together. So that's one of the things that he believes he's found. He's kind of matched the tree type to the trees that were back in that time period on, I think it's Washington Island or one of the islands in the Niagara River there. It's a fairly big island there that he thinks that they built it on. But in this one right here, you can see he's got, there's a keel. Well, it's got, this is what's really kind of strange about it. No one's been able to really kind of understand it. Let me see if I can't. Okay.
There was never any drawing.
No, there was no plans or anything. Yeah, one of those things. probably in a French pub someplace. So this is a picture of Steve on the bottom of what he feels is the shipwreck of the bones of the Griffon. So this is the main line of the keel, and these are the ribs or the frames coming off the side, all right? But what's really strange about it, you have these wings that are coming off on the side. They come off from the keel, and ships like that generally weren't built in the Great Lakes that way. And they're asking, why does that ship have that? It's for extra strength on the bottom and stuff. One type of solution that they think is that they built it on the ground and they had to push it into the river. And they didn't, that's how they, launched it, so they needed a stronger back instead of just having it wiggle waggle and stuff. So they put these extra, I don't know what you would call them. Like I said, I'm not a naval architect, wings on the side to give it more stability from twisting and torquing and stuff, so they could get it into the water and stuff. So that's one of the things that he has seen. The other thing is there's no bolts, okay, no nuts. It's all square. My understanding it's square nails, okay, and hand forged, and they're all wooden pegs that connect things together. So he is looking at that as, as an example of the way things could have been built for the Griffon.
Does that relates to the architecture of the boat that they would build in the Niagara, in that area of the Niagara?
Well, that's
the Griffon.
Great question. I don't personally. I have to go on what Steve believes and what the data is showing, and it's a different type of construction. He's tried to send information to different universities, and they say, well, who's an expert on 1600s French naval architecture in North America? Nobody. And because there was only one boat built in a Griffon. And then what's funny about that is that the Griffon was lost in 1679, and it wasn't until really over almost 100 years before sailing ships came back to the Great Lakes after the American Revolution. The British kind of ran around here in the 1770s and so forth, and they had forts up at Niagara and stuff like this. But for the most part, there was no sailing until the U.S. and after the War of 1812 is when everything exploded into Michigan, Wisconsin, and stuff. That's when you started to see sailing take place again. So, I know Steve would like to probably take some carbon dating samples and so forth, but in order to do that, you have to get permission from the state of Michigan. Yeah, you can't touch, you can touch, you can use a brush to sweep things away, but picking anything up, doing anything is, no. Can't do that, you get in trouble. So that's some of the things Steve's been fighting over the years with the state of Michigan. And like I said, he's had to pay out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to lawyers to to defend his right, but he's won every time. So
this is in Michigan waters.
correct. And if you want to throw another monkey wrench into it, there's a treaty of 1798 that the U.S. signed. The upper half of Lake Huron, upper half of Lake Michigan, everything in the water column is supposed to be owned by the native tribes. Okay? So now you're in the native tribes. The state of Michigan says, we own the bottom lands. Okay, so this rests in the bottom. So that's supposed to be state property, state stuff. So in order to do that, you need a permit. Steve's the only one I know in the history of the state of Michigan to get a permit to excavate on this site for the Griffon many years ago and stuff. What's that? No, that's in Michigan waters. Yep. So it'd be a whole different ballgame if it was in Wisconsin.
Brian, do you know
Yeah.
if they can carbon date it?
Yes.
What degree of accuracy they can get?
My understanding, they probably can get it within a 30 to 40 year range, depending on how far back you go and stuff and how much carbon's lost.
How much do they need? Like a silver?
Probably a fingernail, to date it. So, well, yeah.
Destructive testing. Is there any kind of procedure where you can do non-destructive testing?
There's tons of non-destructive testing, but I don't know what it would get you. You could do a bunch of testing like ultrasonic, X-ray, stuff like that, but okay, it's going to tell you a piece of wood's 12 inches thick, okay, but it doesn't tell you what type of wood it is, where it came from and stuff like that, and it doesn't tell you about dating and so forth. So he's really limited to a paintbrush and a measuring tape and some of my toys that I bring to the site. And like I was saying earlier, I'm a sonar person. I'm not an archaeological person. I'm not a shipwright. I'm not a naval architect, but I love being in the water ever since I was a little kid. This is one of my toys. It's called a scanning sonar, and it's a very precise, very accurate type of sonar. And it sits on a tripod in this position, and it spins 360 degrees around, makes a circle. But it makes some really phenomenal data. And you're able to do all types of measurements with it. So what I do is I will go out and I will take different, go to a shipwreck site. I'll drop the tripod in about 20 different places, and I can put everything together as a big mosaic. So I see the whole outline of what's down there on the bottom and how I put things together. So this is just one of the times we're up there working. So these are just a couple of sonar images. They're not the best because of the screen, but you can see this is a little ways away, but it's they think it's the roof of the deck of the ship that's overturned, exposing, so it goes across. Here's the keel, and these are these wings coming off, and these are the frames going back and forth. There's a pretty big debris field in the area and stuff, so he thinks that with a little bit more time, he can find out. And one of the things that in order to be definitive is you need a piece of information that says this is the Griffon. And as far as I know, there's only two things. Find the logbook, if it's still there, and it's supposed to have 5 or 6 cannon, small little cannons on there. So if you find those, they'll probably have the seal of France on it, and you'll be able to say, yes, that is probably the Griffon site. So, yes?
I know you're not a politician. Why would the state of Michigan want to inhibit this kind of exploration? Do they want the stuff to just rot away before the Great Lakes?
If I say anything, I'm going to have to go to jail. I've never understood that with the state of Michigan. I sat on the governor's board of Underwater Salvage Preserve and for 5 years, and they really don't want private people doing stuff. I think it's because there's one group that does some stuff out of Alpena, but that's just a couple of people. And when you have an inventory of thousands of shipwrecks, how do you know if Bubba goes out there and steals something off a shipwreck? Unless you have an inventory or what's on bottom and stuff. And the other thing is, it was legal to do that to I think the mid 80s or something. You could go in and salvage things. And, if you go up to Charlevoix, right on the north side of the river there, if you go across the lift bridge, there's a bar right there. You go in that bar, okay, that bar table and everything, that's built out of a ship called the Metropolis. Okay, the other half's on the other side in East Bay. It sunk to the bottom. They split it in half. And so a lot of times it's been rape, pillage, and plunder off of shipwrecks. But I think there could be a lot of avocational stuff if the state would open up about it and stuff. I mean, I've worked with other states, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, and they're like, yeah, come on, let's go do stuff. And I've worked with archaeologists around the world, and they're like, yeah, go pick it up, man. Bring it back to us. Let's take measurements and stuff. So I really don't know. I can't answer that. But
It's hard to understand that if they're saying they don't do it, and if they did a very minimal amount of work. Why would they not allow someone with his credentials? It's not like he's like a guy that just showed up from someplace else and said, gee, I feel like diving. He has the credentials and the expertise. You'd think that they would say, okay, you're the only one we're going to give permission to, but at least give it.
I think it gets back to archaeologists are very controlling about their dominion. And the other thing is, we as taxpayers, they don't have a pot to,
Well, they didn't ask us. Maybe we'd say yes.
I'm sure they'd be happy to hear that because they don't have a budget for anything. They do stuff terrestrially on land, but as far as, doing anything in the Great Lakes, mapping things, understanding things, because what's so unique about a shipwreck in the Great Lakes is that you can take any town, Toledo, Bay City, Milwaukee, Escanaba, they all built ships, but they built them a different way because Ernie was in the yard going like, yeah, let's build it. And he was there for 20 years. Then Bubba came in and built ships. So you have a unique time capsule on architecture of shipwrecks and stuff that I don't think they understand. I mean, maybe they do understand, but they just don't have the resources, in my opinion, to really map things and find things. Okay. Well, I'm going to conclude this for the Griffon talk. Now, I've got a couple other talks to keep you going if you want on different things I have done that I know. And like I said, I didn't do a great job, but hopefully I give you a little idea about what the Griffon is, what Steve believes. His book is on Amazon if you'd like to get it and stuff. If you love Great Lakes and exploration and stuff like this, this is kind of like the holy grail of the Great Lakes, is the Griffon. And it's got a mythical name and a mythical, it's kind of like chasing smoke at times. Yeah.
I have one question.
Mhm.
Because Walk in the Water was an Indian name given to that other boat.
Okay, the Bell?
Yeah, was there, is that what La Belle was?
Yeah, the La Belle was the other ship that they built, and they sailed it all the way down the Mississippi River and everything into the Gulf of Mexico, and it was off of Corpus Christi, Texas, where they found it.
Did the Indians have it? This is like Potawatomi.
Correct.
Did the Potawatomi, is there any record of what they called it?
I don't know about that.
The Indian was walking the water. Right?
Yeah.
Did they have a name for La Belle?
I don't know about that. I know that there's a lot of hostilities going down the Mississippi, that some tribes liked them and some other tribes didn't. So they had a lot of fighting taking place and so forth, and a lot of bad experience with the Spanish in that area. So it's just one of those things that it could very well have been, because I know that there are some legends within the Potawatomi tribe about white men and stuff like that I've heard about. So it could be a lot of different things. I just don't know to give you an answer. So, yeah.
Brian, I grew up just a few miles from Fort Miami.
Okay.
With Sal and his men. And if I remember the story right, we heard about this as kids.
Yeah.
Growing up in that area. When the Griffon left Green Bay with all the furs, LaSalle and some of his other men continued on in these great big canoes, and they were following the shores of Lake Michigan and doing more exploration while the Griffon was headed back to dump the furs somewhere. And they were supposed to rendezvous with the Griffon. The Griffon was supposed to dump the furs and pick up Sal and his men, and it never did. So they finally, after a number of traveling and waiting, they finally, winter was coming on, and they built Fort Miami there on this bluff. I don't know if you've ever seen the historical marker there. It's on the bluff.
No, I have not.
It's in the city of St. Joseph.
Okay.
Lake Michigan. And they wintered there, and then what I never heard was when they finally gave up waiting for the Griffon, I don't know where they went after that, because all they had was their canoes and a party of men, and I don't know if they tried to get back somewhere on land or if they...
I wish Steve was here, because like you said, he would know that. He could give you an answer on that. I do not know. Like you said, I know a little bit, probably enough to get me into trouble a lot. So, but yeah, I'm sorry. So, yes.
Quick question. Cannons. What kind of technology to pick up finding cannons on the bottom of the lake like that?
Okay, there's two types of cannons at that time period. You have a bronze possibly, and also a cast iron. If it's cast iron, you can pick them up with an instrument called a magnetometer. You can pull it through the water like a torpedo, and you can look for that type of thing. So there's other, then looking for brass and so forth like that, you're going to look for a different type of magnetometer that can pick up that type of metal, but it's mostly a smaller type thing that you got to be looking for at. And the thing you would look at is if you could find those cannons, you could probably find this is where the ship went down. Because something like that's just going to go bloop right into the water, and you would have a good area of possibly where the ship sunk. I mean, we've had 350 years of this thing on bottom, and all the ice, you know, over the years, and wave action and water and storms and everything, moving things around can really destroy a wreck over time. But a magnetometer would be the type of a piece of a kit that you would need. So, yeah.
You sort of answered my question.
Huh?
The bottomlands of the lake move around with
Mhm.
winter and storms and whatnot. Did he explore this area before years ago when it was covered up and then the storms exposed it, or what was it?
Great question. Yeah, I think, you know, it comes and goes a lot. Because, you know, a couple years ago when we were out there, we had extremely high water levels, you know, like 6-7 feet higher than normal. And now it's down 3 or 4 feet and so forth. So, you know, bigger water volumes, maybe more storms, but maybe more water protects it from being moved around. Shallower water will beat things up more with wave action and stuff like that. So it's kind of a give and take, and you get a lot of, you know, ice breaking up and crushing up against the islands and stuff. Are they going to hit something and break the ship up over time? You know, because you're talking about 350 years, but, you know, we've only been around, you know, I've been around for 62 years, and what's my worst storm I remember? Well, they may have been 10 times worse in that 350-year time period that could have just, you know, trashed the whole area and stuff. So, yeah.
So you said there's a significant number of shipwrecks all along there. How many different ships?
Oh man, I can't even begin. They're all wooden ships, and it's just, it looked like a junkyard down there. I mean, I've seen hundreds of pieces of shipwreck all over the place. And one of the things that people maybe forget about is that during the late 1800s, there were a couple of diving companies, one out of Port Huron, and this guy is kind of like a little hero to me, but his name was Tom Reed. And this guy was crazy because he was a big old hard hat, you know, Mark V diver. And these guys would take off on the middle of a snowstorm out of Port Huron in 1900 and go north because there's a ship went down, and they will go out and salvage it. And there's ships that have been ripped apart by these guys. They salvaged everything, you know, back then, because the insurance company would pay for it. If you had a load of coal, load of rock, you had a load of iron ingots or copper coming out of the Keweenaw or something, they were out there salvaging it. And these guys would take off, and it was amazing what these guys could do over time. And it's just like, I kind of wonder why everything is, you know, it hasn't been raped and pillaged on the bottom, because these guys are phenomenal at doing stuff.
What was the name of that company?
The guy, diver's name is Tom Reed. Yeah, R-E-E-D. There's a book his daughter wrote. I think it's called Salvage Diver. And it's fantastic because it's about, he starts in about 1880 and he goes all the way to the 1950s when he passes away. And it's just amazing taking off in a snowstorm, going to, you know, Sault Ste. Marie out of Port Huron. I mean, there's nobody. There's no radio. There's no, you know, you're 30 miles offshore in the storm, and you're just trugging along, man, because you got to go to work and stuff. So these guys are amazing what they would do and stuff. Yeah.
The signature of this wreck, that's the Griffon, would be the cannons, right?
Yes.
So has he investigated looking for the cannons?
I don't know yet, because he just found this a year or two ago. All right, and so we're going to go back up there and do some more sonar work, I think this summer, and we'll, you know, kind of map out some things and figure out some stuff, and maybe try and get a magnetometer and see if we can't pick something up. But again, though, you're not allowed to, you know, go dig it up, you know, and bring it to the surface and stuff like that. So you've got to, maybe if you can brush it away, the sand and stuff like this, you may be able to see it.
The guy you're talking about may have been there and took the cannons.
You know what? Nothing surprises me.
This is why Michigan has laws now.
I will refuse to say names, But there was a family that were after Tom Reed, this salvage yard, another group that they live on Beaver Island. And what I've been told is they have 4 huge cow barns full of shipwreck stuff. And it was all through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. They were out there salvaging stuff, you know. So it's, Michigan's got a great history of shipwrecks and pirates and all that type of stuff. So, okay. Yeah.
What might be restrictions if there's things you may have located on shore? Remove something from the bottom of the water, but what if there's some things that might be significant that have washed ashore?
Like, oh, okay, like a piece of shipwreck and stuff washed. Again, I don't think you're allowed to touch it. I don't know the laws that well, but I think you have to let things lay and take your pictures and take some measurements, stuff like this, but you're not allowed to, like, you know, pick it up, take it back and put it, make yourself a mantle in the fireplace and stuff, you know.
Is there a specific place to take something like that?
What do you mean? I'm not fun.
You didn't know when you picked it up. Now you want to make sure those things should happen.
You're going to have to answer to a conservation officer on that one. That, yeah, if they find that, they're going to come talking to you and you might have a little bit of a fine. But the best thing is to say you don't know where it came from, originally from the house. So it was there when I bought the house. So. I'm just saying, you know, hypothetically. Always hypothetically. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. I've got you for another half hour, if that's okay. I'm going to take you on another world tour. This is something I did several years ago. And to me, it was really cool about stuff. And like I said, this is who I am and so forth, these pictures. These are sonar images of bridges. That's me when I had hair and I was skinny and I could dive. So I've been very lucky. That picture right there is in 2010. I was part of the Titanic mapping expedition where we went out and mapped the Titanic, all 1 by 2 mile area and stuff. We found everything that we could possibly find on bottom of Titanic. So that was a pretty phenomenal project I was on. So I've been very lucky over the years to work on some really phenomenal archaeological projects and so forth, but we've kind of talked about that a little bit, about my company. I was called over to the Mediterranean off the coast of Sicily by this company called RPM Nautical. And they're an archaeological, I guess, nonprofit agency that goes around the Mediterranean looking at ancient stuff, whether Phoenician, Greek, or Roman, or whatever, and they go out and they map and they find things and they discover things. They were starting to understand sonar, but they needed help with it, so through the grapevine, they got a hold of me and we went over there to work. So I want to take you back to March 10th of 241 BC, okay? Everyone has heard of the Roman Empire, right? Everyone has heard of Carthage, all right? Well, off the coast of Sicily here are these little islands. There's a town called Trapani, and they're called the Eggle Islands. And the First Punic War was taking place. Rome was on the area around Trapani with their commanding and legions and so forth. Rome wanted to crush Carthage and get them out of the Western Mediterranean. So they kind of clashed at this area. Rome had 250 ships. Carthage had 200. Although the Carthaginians were better sailors, masters of everything, the Romans were starting to learn. This is their first attempt at a naval engagement and naval battle that took place. So here's a little example of the area. Let's see. All right. Maybe I can. The battle, here's the town of Trapani. And the battle took place out in this area here. And it was a huge naval engagement. And at the end of the day, the Romans won. They defeated the Carthaginian They destroyed 20 20 Carthaginian ships and took 70 of them prisoner, the ships. Rome lost about 60 ships in this battle. So it was a pretty big engagement and stuff. So this is what it was kind of like. What the Romans did that helped them is that they stripped their ships down to nothing. All they had is guys rowing and guys in armor and swords ready to jump onto the other ship. And they had these special, you can't see it, but I'll show it to you in a moment here. They had the keel comes along the bottom here. And on the keel here, they had this big brass ram, it's called. And in the ancient world, they said the loudest noise was 2 rams, ships heading head on. It was just a phenomenal sound. So that's what they would do. They would try and get the angle on another ship and ram it. Then they would throw the planks down, their men would run across and go to war. So the commanders, the Roman commander is Gaius Catulus, and the Carthaginian commander is Hamilcar by Car, who is actually the father of Hannibal, if you remember him, who terrorized Italy for about 20 years before the Romans got him. So it's a beautiful place. Not real deep water, but 300 to 350 feet. These islands are out there. They use them as resorts now that you can get out there and stuff. They've been lighthouses. They've been, churches. They've been mosques. They've been everything. This is the crosswords of Europe. So everybody and anybody's been there. So we had several tools of the trade on the ship that we used. I'm putting my sonar that I was using for this job on a crane and lowering it all the way down in the water 350 feet. Now, this contraption right here is called an ROV, remotely operated vehicle. And it's a big one. It's about 5 feet tall. It can go to 4,000 or 5,000 feet in depth, but it has a whole bunch of tools on board. Sonars, claws to grab things and move things around, really high-end cameras so you can see what's going on the bottom when you go looking for things. Because the sonar will pick up targets. I can't tell you what it is until we put eyes on it. It may appear to be an airplane, but is it a piece of rock? I don't know till we kind of look at it. So we were finding, this is from the ROV, find all sorts of artifacts. So we have a jug over there of kind of like an amphora, and we have an anchor, A lot of times they would just take a big piece of stone, wrap a rope around it, and there's your anchor. All right? So this is one of these times that I'd rather be lucky than good. And this is our first sonar drop. I was there for 2 weeks. And we're looking at the sonar on the bottom. So it's showing us, it's scanning the whole bottom. And it's 40 meters, so roughly 130 feet across from here, from this center point to here. And I see some rocks, but I see this really weird thing right next to the sonar. Okay, it's got a weird shadow behind it. So sonar's like, if I stick a flashlight at you, you're gonna cast a shadow. And that's what I'm seeing there. I'm going, wow, that's really weird. And the guys are like, oh, is that what I think it is? I don't know. And this thing that's right here that's kind of glowing right now, that's the ROV that's down there watching everything. So I'm like, yeah, it's a target. And I don't know what it is, but they're getting pretty excited. So I have the ability to go different distances. So I can drop the range down now to 3 meters. And I've got this target right here about the 1 o'clock position. And I still got this really weird shadow. This is the ROV here coming in on things. I'm going, I have no idea what that is. Doesn't make sense to me. Okay, I'm a sonar guy. There's a target. You tell me what it is. So then they have the ROV come in. Hopefully this takes off. So this is the ROV camera filming this. All right, so it's coming in. Let me get this out of the way. On this as it looks on the bottom. And the guys start going nuts, jumping up and down. And I'm going, that's pretty cool, but I don't know what it is. It looks like a boot. But they're going, guy, that is a ram. That goes on the nose of an ancient ship. And that's where that ship went down 2,200 years ago. The ROV's bouncing around and stuff, but they're looking at it. Okay, it's got some growth on it and stuff. These are made of bronze. So they're able to come in, take a look at it, figure out what's going on, and say, okay, now remember I said the ROV has different tools on it? So they're able to get ropes and straps and put them on there, and then they can bring it back to the surface. Oops, why is this going this? So they're able to bring it up, and it's a ram, and on this slide here you can see they bring it back to the surface, and they're cleaning it up. Okay, so this is a ram off an ancient Roman ship, and it's boys will be boys. They found Latin inscription on this, and it translates to roughly "come get some." Okay, God's truth. So it was on here. So I mean, this is a real Roman legion ship and so forth. So they get it cleaned up in the laboratory. They bring in a laser scanner so they can laser scan it down to millimeter accuracy. From that, they believe, I've been told, I haven't seen any data or anything, that they can reconstruct these Roman ships from that ram because the keel fit right in there, so forth. And the next slide, I believe, this is part of it, but you can see the unique carving and stuff that was done on it. I think that's, I don't know who that is, I don't remember. But you can see the artwork that was put on these rams and stuff. So it's pretty unique. And if you look at the nose right here, okay, here's this brass. Okay, this is actually a Greek ship. They rebuilt it back in the 80s. They built one, and they put a ram on it. But nobody knew what a ram would look like until they started bringing them up. I think I found number 6. They found 20 so far off there, off of the islands and so forth. They're able to bring that up and look at that and put that back together and stuff. So we also started to find other things on bottom, looking around. And here's just a gray snapshot. Here's the one with a little bit of color on this shot. Does anyone want to take a guess what that might be? What? No, no cannonballs. No skulls. You're close. Bingo. That is a real Roman Legionnaire's helmet. And I had to stop for a minute and say, wow, that had a human being in it at one time. There was gray matter in that helmet. That was a Legionnaire that fought in the end of the First Punic War. And so it was kind of humbling to see something like that had been down there for almost 2,200 years. Okay, so it's a very unique, phenomenal experience I had on this. Here's the crew that we worked with. I'm stuck in the back there because I'm just the sonar guy. So one of the things that I've worked on ships all over the world, and the food generally sucks. And they actually had a 5-star cook come out and spend for the 3 weeks we were out there. And yeah, the cookies, the gorgonzola, the salads, I've never ate so well in my life with this guy. And it's just like, you know, you had nothing to bitch about because the food was good, you know? I've looked at, you know, that's why I always take peanut butter and jelly with me on a ship because you don't trust it a lot of times. So that's real quick through my run through things. I always try. I love Far Side, you know. So.
What's the say?
Says.
That's it. I thought he was coming up.
Awful easy. So there used to be a man in that helmet. So he's down on the bottom blowing bubbles. So, so one of the other things I do is that I'm very proud of and to be involved with is I do MIA work. And I'll go to the Pacific, I'll go to Europe. I will look for lost airplanes, vehicles, landing craft, and so forth. And I've been to several battlefields in World War II, Tarawa, Kwajalein. Anyone hear of Yap? Yep, I've been to Yap a couple times, hoping to get back there. There's a couple of B-24s that are missing, but I've been to Europe a few times looking for lost bombers in the Adriatic and stuff. So I've been very blessed to do a lot of the work I do. But that's the thing people ask you, what do you like the most? And that's really what I love to do. I was hoping that one of my friends was going to be here tonight, partner in crime, but he had a conflict. But we met a gentleman about 3 years ago, and he only met his father once, and he was only 3 months old. And it was 1943. And his father was a door gunner in a B-17. And his father made a bomb run. He was in Italy and made the bomb run all the way up to Venice. Then they cut back across the Adriatic. Well, they took damage and by flak in Venice. And the plane blew up and everybody was killed. They haven't found the plane or anything, but lo and behold, about 6 years ago, an Italian fisherman's out there dragging his nets and he drags up a 50 caliber machine gun. Well, that 50 caliber machine gun has a serial number on it. That serial number matched his father's plane. So that gave us an idea where to go look. But it gave us an opportunity to go through the National Archives to find this stuff. And we found out, that area of the water, the Adriatic, was actually controlled by the British Coast Guard. It wasn't American, because they said they did see shoots going on. So they think they took those boys that they picked up in the water and they took them to Tunisia and buried them there. And so Paul, my friend, is going to Tunisia in a couple of days, and he's going to go to the cemetery where they're going to take several DNA samples and try and see if they can't match this man to his father that he never met, stuff like that. So that's some of the stuff that I can't tell you what it means to bring somebody home to their family that was, my brother, because the World War II generation is moving on. They're pretty much gone now. And trying to give them some form of closure, because now it's like, well, great Uncle Billy, disappeared and off of Tarawa, and nobody knows what happened to him and stuff like that. Other than that, he died there. And so that's one of the things I really enjoy doing, is going to these different places and looking for remains of U.S. service people, because it's getting better now, but when I first started this 10 years ago, there was over 100,000 missing Americans from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and so forth. And there's another 30,000 missing Americans that are non-combatant, like their plane ditched in the ocean in 1958. Well, they just disappeared. We've got the infamous Kinchlow fighter plane that disappeared chasing a UFO over Lake Superior in the 70s. That man's never been found. And there's a couple other things like that that are in the Great Lakes that need to be looked at. Yeah.
That was my question.
Mm-hmm.
On the naval training bases, Great Lakes
Yeah.
of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and the one in Lake Erie. Any planes that went down, trainer planes that you've seen under the water?
I have not seen them, but there are companies that are bringing them up. How they're doing that, I have no idea. Maybe because they're in Wisconsin or Illinois waters. Because, the Navy's really touchy about stuff like that. You can go look, you can take images, sonar them and stuff like this, but because generally they'll have the pilot in them still, because they didn't hit the carrier deck right and they went off. And so it's one of those things that I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. The people are salvaging, looking for those planes and so forth. And I believe the state of Michigan found one of the original red tail black aviation pilots from World War II. Yeah, Tuskegee Airmen off of Port Huron out in Lake Michigan. They found him in his plane here about 3-4 years ago, if I remember right.
They just dedicated a memorial there.
Did they? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, that's excellent to hear and stuff. But So I'm a little early. I had another presentation, but it's going to take too much time, but I'd like to just open it up. Yeah.
At the beginning, before you officially started, which is 54-7, you were mentioning a storm that came down the Great Lakes. Was that the Great Hurricane in 1913?
Well, that was one of them, yeah. I think I was talking about that one that destroyed so many of the ships, you know. Yeah. Yeah, that was a really bad, violent storm and so forth. And yeah, there's just, you know, but weather and technology, people see things coming 2-3 days ahead of time. And, you know, it's, you know, 10 hours on the Great Lakes, you can be in a lot of different places for safety, especially with the big freighters, 1,000-footers and stuff like that now. They know what they're doing out there. They have the technology. You know, I know they sometimes the guys get caught a little bit. They'll get stuck in the ice up there, like a few years ago at the Sioux, and the Coast Guard has to come out and break out the ice to get them because they started going too early, and the pack ice kind of moved them in and stuff. So, but yeah, it's yeah. I'm trying to remember the other storm that was really bad, but it was the 1870s, I think. They remember that. So.
Is that the one with that show we saw with the Christmas trees to Chicago? They went down.
Yeah, that was, I forget the time period, but that guy, yeah, I don't know. To me, the Christmas tree ship, there's probably 20 books out there about, it's about a gentleman. He was running, it was late, getting late in December, and he wanted to make some money. So he ran from Chicago up to Milwaukee to pick up a bunch of Christmas trees. They were piled 20 feet high on the ship. Well, he wasn't paying attention. To me, he was kind of negligent, and he ended up killing his crew and himself. And it's known as a Christmas tree ship. And he was trying to bring back the Christmas trees back to Chicago and so forth. So it's a pretty famous story within the Great Lakes, but yeah.
Still should have listened to the Potawatomi weatherman.
But probably should have. Yep, I agree. They can change stuff. Yeah.
You say you were involved with the Titanic?
Yes.
Prior to that, were you involved on the research they did on the submarine that imploded? There was an agreement with the military.
Oh, the Thresher? No, I was not.
Before they were allowed to go into the Titanic, they had a special agreement. They'd use the same equipment to search for the submarine to get the pictures and everything, and then they were permitted after that to go finish up.
Yeah, that was Robert Ballard in 1986. Him and his crew are the ones that found Titanic. But you're absolutely right. They were using the Thresher, to find the Thresher, then do an analysis of what happened to the Thresher. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's another one too out there that talks about it in Blind Man's Bluff. And but yeah, that's a really good book for understanding what happened to the Thresher and the other submarine that disappeared called the Scorpion. So.
One imploded, one exploded.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
First, by any chance, were you also involved in the Edmund Fitzgerald?
No. No, I was not.
Second question, are you still involved at all in the Oak Island project? Or?
If they need me, you know, it's one of those things. Yeah, it's a great project. I love that part of the world. And Marty Lagina, Rick Lagina, Craig Tester are great people. And they've treated me wonderful over the years. I'm good friends with them and stuff. But if they need something sonar-wise, I'll probably be there. But they haven't really needed me. They're pretty much on all land and stuff like that right now. So.
Is that series ever going to end?
It's making money, baby. What do you want?
That's the goal, Dan.
Yeah.
As long as they haven't found anything, that's keep searching.
They find a lot of stuff, but we were talking about it earlier. It's like they don't have a piece of something that says, yes, this is the menorah. They don't have, you know, a piece of Spanish silver or you know, a medallion or anything like that. So it's open to anything interpretation-wise as far as what possible treasure could be there. It's amazing what happened on that island when you think of all the roads that were built, the kilns that they found, all the other artifacts they found. But again, they still haven't found the treasure yet. And I'm not ripping on them, but it's a beautiful place, but it's a weird place. A lot of weird things happen on that island. And when equipment goes down, it goes down all the time. You can be sitting here in a newly charged microphone. It's all ready to go at 7 o'clock in the morning. You're ready to go, and it's 7:02 and the battery dies. Brand new charge, that overnight and everything. And there's just a lot of weird things on that happen on that island. The curse, yeah, it's weird. It's a weird place. Yeah.
What's the oldest brick you've ever found?
Oldest brick?
Yep.
I think it was, I was working in New York City, and we found a dump yard in the Hudson River that was full of bricks. So being divers, we're like scoundrels. We just started bringing up bricks, and they were all from all different types of manufacturers in the 1800s. So I've got a couple of bricks that are from a manufacturer, I forget the name of it, on the Hudson River in New York City.
I need your address after. I'm member number 712 for the International Association of Brick Collectors.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got an organization of brick collectors all across the world.
Okay.
And if you ever need information, I'll share this with you.
Okay.
A librarian that can give you information.
All right. I'll try and dig them out. So, but that's great. I love that. So, yeah.
Have you looked at hypothetical something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I need an opinion of someone that's had seen them.
Well, thank you for coming by. I really enjoyed it. I apologize about the Griffon, but it was wonderful talking with everybody tonight. Okay? Thank you for coming.